Good morning. Happy Friday. Mrs. Posner's back with our last read aloud of the week, and I saved my favorite until the last day. Today, I am going to read Rosie, Revere, Engineer. Now, earlier, when we started our distance learning, I read some of the other books in the same series, and I know we had heard Rosie, Revere, Engineer from Miss Sem during science, but I thought I would read it again because it really is one of my favorite books. So I'm going to share my screen, and we have Rosie, Revere, Engineer by Andrea Beatty and illustrated by David Roberts. We also read, I believe, Iggy Peck, Architect, and Sofia Valdez for Prez, and maybe Ada Twist Scientist. I can't remember if we've read all of them. I'll have to check, but this is my favorite one. This is the first one that the authors wrote. So let's read Rosie, Revere, Engineer. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's class at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaways under the eaves. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head, from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knew kept the pythons away. When it was finished, young Rosie was proud. But Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. "I love it," Fred hooted. "Oh, truly I do." But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. So he laughed at her, and she didn't like it, and she felt embarrassed, and she did not want to build anymore. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who worked building planes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky. "The only thrill left on my list is to fly. But time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady dream." That night, as Rosie lied wide awake in her bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, "No, not I." But questions are tricky and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Strapped to the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The Helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter. She turned round to see that old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought, "Oh no, never, not ever again. Will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever, a switch, or a gear? And never will I be a great engineer." She turned round to leave, but then great-great-aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. "You did it. Hooray. It's the perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next." Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. "I failed," said dear Rosie. "It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed." "Yes," said her great aunt. "It crashed. That is true. But first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, Before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flap was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her handkerchief around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear, to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 built gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. The end. I love that book so much. In the end, she was teaching everybody how to be an engineer, right? And she said the only true failure can come if you quit. So don't quit, keep trying. I love that so much. These books are all on Epic, by the way, at getepic.com. If you guys have access to that, you can see the other books in the same series, Ada Toy Scientist and Iggy Peck Architect. Well, I hope you liked that story today. Again, it's one of my favorite books, and I'm so happy I got to read it to you. Have a great Friday, a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye, friends.